It's after 1 o'clock, so I'm going to start our presentation today. Good afternoon, and thank you for attending today's visiting artist presentation by Selena Roman. My name is Carrie Morgan, and I have the good fortune of being the gallery director at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and also the co-chair of the Visiting Artists Committee. Before I introduce Selena, I'll take a moment to acknowledge that the land that MCAT occupies is on the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary homelands of the Dakota and Anishinaabe peoples. As a creative college community, we're dedicated to learning more about the legacies of systemic violence, displacement, migration, settlement, and slavery that have shaped our nation. I urge you to consider the land on which you live and join us in being committed to cultural awareness, social responsibility, and measurable actions to support and benefit the Indigenous peoples who are living alongside us on the land that we occupy today. This Zoom event is going to be recorded for archival purposes. Live closed captioning is available, but it must be turned on by individual users. All audience members' mics are automatically muted for the duration of the lecture until our Q&A segment. The chat section is available for tech support questions, as well as for your comments, but questions for the artist, will not be prompted until the Q&A section. And during that time, you may unmute yourself to ask questions out loud, or you also can type them into chat and I will read them aloud for Selena. I also want to thank our current and former members of the Visiting Artists Committee, especially Kylie Van Note and Ellen Mueller, for their roles in making Selena's visit possible, and also to Academic Affairs for making resources available through the Gray Fund. And finally, to introduce Selena. So Selena Roman is a Tampa-based Florida native and a photographer. Before turning her lens toward fine art, she was a print journalist, writing features and covering courts and local migrant communities. Before receiving her master's degree of fine arts from the University of South Florida in 2013, she also worked for an international security firm where she learned about private sector intelligence community, which helped rekindle a deep love for photography. Over the past several years, Selena has exhibited nationally at institutions such as the Ringling Museum of Art in Sarasota, Florida, the Kenyon College in Ohio, and internationally at Edna Manley College of Visual and Performing Arts in Kingston, Jamaica, as well as Universidad del Sagrado Corazon in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Her work has been featured at Brighton Photo Fringe in the UK, and in 2017, she received a Hillsborough County Artist Grant and was invited to participate in Review Santa Fe 2019 and Critical Mass 2020. Selena currently teaches visual art and photography classes at the University of Tampa, Hillsborough Community College, and Wayne State College in Nebraska. Her work explores ideas of femininity, perception, liminality, memory, place, and how the invisible offers more answers than what's visible. Please join me in welcoming Selena.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. And I wanted to take a minute just to thank the MCAD community and thank Carrie, Kylie, and Ellen for bringing me on and inviting me to participate. I'm really excited. So thank you. So I'm going to start in a second. And I just wanted to say that the talk today, I wanted to just share my background, the work I've created over the years, how I've gotten there, the journey I've been on. It's really interesting. I know probably a lot of you are in grad school, and being in the thick of grad school, it's really hard sometimes to see, what is it, the forest for the trees? You're so, making studio visits, deadlines. And I have to say that seed of grad school has just, it's been growing so much. So many things that were said in grad school take shape and make sense now. And it's almost 10 years ago. And it's just really interesting to look back at one's work and what you've created and start to see those patterns emerge and make connections of why things are happening in the work. And again, that wasn't happening in grad school. Maybe some of you are, and that's wonderful. I'm delighted. I'll be delighted to hear that if that's happening. But for me, it was very much a delayed journey. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So welcome. We will get back to this image, but it's a more recent image in the last few years, and I think it kind of embodies a lot of the things that I'll be talking about. The averted gaze, my love of colors, my love of props, and my love of photographing people and putting them in strange positions and locations. But we'll start off chronologically, again, just to give you that foundation of where I'm coming from, being born an 80s, 90s kid, and all of those visual things, cultural things, societal things that were flooding my little impressionable brain, like Gem, a cartoon that came on before school. It was about a woman with two personalities, one was the businesswoman, and then one was the singer, the performer, the artist. And so this two-sided woman, right? And when I think about it, pretty forward for a kid's show in the 80s. And it was based around fashion. And of course, I loved that, and colors. And there was good and evil in the show. And so it cemented a lot of things for me. Again, that love of fashion. And then, of course, with that love of fashion was following celebrity fashion. I remember looking at my parents' Star magazine or Us magazines and seeing what celebrities were wearing. This is Cher during the Oscars wearing a Bob Mackie dress. And so I fell in love with Bob Mackie. True story, just a quick aside, one of my closest friends in Tampa is friends with Bob Mackie. I haven't met him yet, but I hope to one day. And so I thought I wanted to be a fashion designer. I really did. As a small kid, I would sketch for hours, different clothing designs. I even had a name of what my design company would be. And so drawing and creating had always been part of my upbringing. And also as an only child, jumping ahead here. As an only child, I had to entertain myself, basically. I had cousins, but I had to entertain myself. And some of that meant snooping around the house for porn. I'll be honest. And thinking about this particular issue growing up, I'm forgetting her name, Vanessa Williams. Vanessa Williams, she was Miss America, and they found out she had done some nude photos and they revoked her title. And looking back now, again, a woman being reprimanded for showing her body, again, planted some of these seeds just of how we as women view our bodies, think about our bodies, how a lot of times our bodies are for the commodity and gaze of men, but not really for us. And so, it was a scandal then, but it really planted some seeds along the way, just in my own mind. And then, of course, growing up in Florida, I love to mention all of the things that are destined to kill you as a Floridian, where we have something like sinkholes. I'm not sure if you all in Minnesota have them, but the ground under us is not very stable, and often it will swallow entire neighborhoods. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but this was like 2 to 3 houses a couple years ago, so I'm not exaggerating too much. And it's really scary and awful, and you never know when it's going to happen. Oftentimes it's after a rain. And so living with this knowledge that while Florida is beautiful, sometimes it does want to take your life. Hurricanes, we have alligators, right? The local animal population, mostly alligators, an alligator on an alligator float. And also serial killers, and Florida Man, Ted Bundy, and Eileen Wuornos. And again, hope it doesn't look like I'm glorifying them by any means, but as a Floridian in a state where we have open records laws, sunshine laws, so that's why a lot of people have determined everything from Florida is weird, because there's no filter. There is no filter. And as a former newspaper reporter, we see everything because of these open records. So we see all the news of the strange. And as a kid growing up, it's fascinating. It's a little terrifying. And again, this idea of danger always lurking somewhere, either from nature or from a person, is just really part of your being. You grow up with that skepticism, so to speak. And then bringing it back to fashion, of course, again, all of these things are just ebbing and flowing in my mind as a kid, still loving fashion, 90s fashion. I would go every day, or not every day, every month to the grocery store to pick up the latest issue of Vogue and seeing, the colors, the saturated colors, especially of the 90s, the tights, which I realized, definitely make an appearance back in my work. And then a more sobering turn, growing up as a child and watching the Gulf War happen, a very much televised war on CNN, and that becoming part of my visual vocabulary. And also as a kid, taking a stand. I remember writing to the local newspaper, just a little letter to the editor, but it got published. And I think seeing my name in print, that started the other wheels turning. And let's see, so that started the other wheels turning. And I'll just say that I left drawing and fashion behind for quite a long time as I pursued newspaper reporting throughout middle school, high school, college, and then getting a staff position at a local newspaper. And I loved it. I joke that newspaper reporting is like dog years. And so my several years felt like 20 years in the newspaper business. And as much as I loved what I was doing, I wasn't feeling extremely fulfilled. So I had moved to Miami thinking that I did want to become a fashion designer again. But I realized I did not like sewing. I did not care for serger machines and ironing. I hate ironing. So all of these things, but I did realize I was apprenticing with a local designer, the woman on the right, Case, and I started documenting her process. I was basically the documentary photographer on her photo shoot. She had the primary creative photographer, and I loved doing that. And then I started to realize that I was coming up with my own ideas for shoots. They were becoming a little more involved. And, she started to give me a little more space to become creative with her and not just documenting what was happening. But it was great. I learned a lot. I learned how to deal with models, makeup artists, an entire team of people to see a vision through. And that was really important and formative for me in those years in Miami. I think there's a little lag when I advance the screen. So forgive the quality of this one. This is way back when, but I would say this is a turning point in my artistic career. This is when things started to solidify for me that I really liked creating images and staging images. So this was one of those photo shoots that I was on with Case, the fashion designer. It was the end of the day. The photographer was packing up. Everyone was getting ready to leave. And I saw this porta potty and I just thought, wow, look at these models in these couture dresses. Let's just pretend they are waiting for, the use of this disgusting object. And this really, again, it was a turning point. I decided after this, I want to see this through. I want to see what else I can come up with. And it's one of those images where I look back at it and I can see a dozen flaws or things I could have done better, but it on a sentimental level, there's a lot there for me. And so while I was still living in Miami, it was that period of my artistic journey where ignorance is bliss. And I think hopefully everyone has had that moment where you don't know all the rules yet. You don't know necessarily what all's been done before you. You just create, and you don't really question it. And so it is very liberating in a way. And so that's what I was doing. I had these ideas and I had to see them through. So this was part of a small series I did where I was wondering, what would Frida do if she were alive today, would she wax her eyebrows? Would she keep them? And how would it look? It would look ridiculous. And so I found a model that I thought resembled her and, you know, modernized her a bit. And again, just having fun. Those early days would, I mean, my work is still about joy, or my joy in creating it. But I mean, then it really was just pure joy. And then pivoting back to imagery that I think about often. This is Andy Sweet. He documented Miami Beach in the 70s and early 80s when it was still a Jewish retirement community. You had a lot of Holocaust survivors living there, living out their retirement. And he just had this beautiful sense of composition, capturing the light that is so beautiful in South Florida, and just the humor and characters and compassion for this community. It all comes across in his photos. Here's another one. And growing up as a child in Florida in the 80s, again, looking back now, I mean, the popularity of the Golden Girls, I mean, it's always been popular to me and that aesthetic, but, you know, seeing that now this whole new generation is growing to love that aesthetic and the Golden Girls is just wonderful. I don't feel so alone anymore. Let's see. So I wanted to talk about some themes that are a constant in my work, which would be the obstructed / averted gaze. And it's just a strategy I adopted with one of these early projects right before grad school called the Burka Project. And it got me thinking, and this is actually not from the Burka Project, but it does look like a burqa. But it just got me thinking of who's looking at who. What does it mean when we don't return a gaze, or a gaze isn't for us? And these ideas of power, and what is that dynamic like? And I found this quote that Lewis Baltz, from Lewis Baltz, who said, "The more that's seen, the less is revealed." And coming from journalism too, and kind of tying like that former career into my photo career, that idea when there's silence or something's not being said, we were taught that that can say often volumes than actual words being said. And so that still, I feel like, translates into my work a great deal. And I'll come back to this. This is from another series called Please Disturb. I often think about painting, and definitely this work by Gerhard Richter. It's a painting of his daughter, Betty. And I believe from the backstory, she's looking at one of his paintings. And I love this painting for a lot of reasons. Obviously, the averted gaze, she's not looking at us, so it makes it more mysterious. What is she looking at? Why is her back to us? But also, too, his wonderful relationship to photography, how this, to me, I still see it as a photograph and not as a painting. It's the first time I saw it was during an exchange in Paris, and I saw the banners of this painting up throughout the city, and I didn't know of Richter at the time, and I thought, oh, I'm going to see a photo show. This is exciting. And when I learned it was a painting, it was just phenomenal. But I mean, he's obviously paying attention to things like depth of field and the lighting. So I just found it very fascinating. And images like this, Stephen Shore photographing Ginger Shore at the Causeway Inn in Tampa. Again, when I was doing research and just looking or doing a little more research on images I'd always loved, or just scratching the surface with them, the fact that he made this right down the street from where I am is just phenomenal to me. Now that place is gone, it's paved. I think it's like a 4-lane highway, but still that romance is definitely still there. And of course, the averted gaze. So then taking just a step back to that early work, for example, the Burka Project, I started it right before grad school. I began grad school in about 2010. And the Afghan war was still, raging, seeing the news discuss the plight of women there, the oppression, and seeing these burqas constantly. And I know this work can be conflicting. It can be, I'm coming at it from a privileged place as a Western woman, adopting this garment in my work. And it's been an interesting journey with this work. In grad school, I had students from the Female Muslim Association come look at the work. I wanted their feedback, again, knowing that I was taking something that wasn't mine. But I loved it as a symbol. And I loved hearing from them. I loved hearing their views on modesty. And it was really eye-opening. I always wanted to come to this project with, an open mind. I always, again, from journalism, there's always 2, 3, 4 sides to a story. And I knew just the one side I was hearing wasn't the entire reality of it. And going back to those early issues of Vogue that I was reading in the 90s, this is from my very treasured 100th anniversary issue of Vogue from 1992. And going back through that magazine, my heart just like a gaping hole in my chest, like, wow, this seed was planted long ago. So this is an ad for Bajan perfume. I believe the owner is Iranian. And he says, women should be quiet, composed, obedient, grateful, modest, respectful, submissive, and very, very serious. And there was companion image. It was like a double page ad. And the other image is of the woman in a baseball cap holding a baseball bat and kind of like screaming in like a joyous way. And then it talks about how women should be flirtatious, outgoing, loud, basically the opposite of everything you see in this ad. And so just very powerful imagery, in what it represents, and just raising a lot of questions and things to think about for me. And I was also thinking about, I love contradictions and how things can often negate themselves. And I thought about how the materiality of the burqa. So it's designed to cover a woman. You can't see any of her features in comparison to some other Islamic coverings. And what happens when you wet it, right? Its functionality weakens. Now we can see through the fabric and get more. We can see more than what we did before. So playing with those contradictions was really interesting to me at the time. I also thought again about the materiality of it, the movement of it, and I did a small series within the larger series where they're looking like they're floating. I'll give you the backstory. I photoshopped people's legs out as they were running. I did try to have people jump, but it was just too difficult. So Photoshop won in this one. I don't use Photoshop hugely in my work, but this is one of the projects where it played an integral role. So. And then also starting to move them into abstraction. There is a human under here, and I was just fascinated with this as an object and what could happen. I didn't talk too much about the porta potty image, but I've had this fascination with objects that are questionable, that are loathed or don't have much respect or a fan base. And so it's these objects that are sort of like, I don't want to say underdogs, but just, again, not respected, not really cared for. And my challenge is, can I elevate them? Can I make them beautiful? Can I give a viewer pause and think about, whoa, well, what is it that I am looking at? It's this terrible thing or this awful thing or what I've been told is an awful thing, but it doesn't look so awful. So creating that push and pull, that tension is really important to me in my work. So some more averted gazes. I enjoy being open-ended with my work. I know clearly there can be like a feminist read of my work, and I know I approach it, I would say subconsciously. A lot of what I do is instinctual, and then I look back at it, and I start to see those patterns emerge, and things make even more sense. So these images are part of my graduation thesis project called Confidence Tastes Like a Low-Slung Cloud. And it really was a rumination on just continuing that idea of the averted gaze. What happens when a gaze isn't returned to us? We expect so much from a person's face. What happens when we don't have that? Where else do our eyes travel? What other things can that make us think of? And, we know these are female figures, but they don't quite look human. These are vintage Majorette costumes that I started collecting, pairing them with colorful tights, strange headgear, vintage swimming caps like you saw in the previous image. And I talk more about my father later on, but growing up with a Catholic mother, a Puerto Rican father, these ideas of gendered roles made very apparent growing up. And I think this particular body of work too was my way of dealing with not being so giving, not being so nurturing, perhaps. A lot of things being withheld in these images. And so I see that now in the work. These are from the same body of work taken in the Florida Springs. So while we have beautiful beaches, we also have fantastic springs that are 72 degrees year round and beautiful places to photograph. People like to talk about my relationships with models in my work and my use of them. And it's very much a dynamic that's based on trust. My friend right here in the pool, that was stagnant pool water. And looking back, that was a horrible thing to ask her to do. It was pool water in January in Florida, so it wasn't fresh. And I don't even like to think of the organisms that were in there, but it made for a wonderful image, and she's fine. She's alive today. And I think a lot of people who will sit or swim or pose for me, they realize, I think for the most part, that it's their immediate discomfort is really just for a grander object, a grander art object. So I've become a lot more respectful of my models since then. I'm just trying to. All right, so the Confidence Tastes Like a Low-Slung Cloud series, I still use the tights in my work. I still use the sequined outfits, but post-grad school, I didn't have a studio anymore. I didn't save up money, and I really was missing the studio in general, just this place to create, a place to commiserate and share ideas with the fellow grad students. And it hit me about a year or two after grad school, how could I make a lot of work in a short period of time and also visit with people? I was missing, again, that dialogue. And I decided that I would rent motel rooms for a few days, hunker down, and let people come visit me. I'd be armed with props, and we would make images in the course of a couple hours in these motel rooms. Again, I'm choosing rooms that are kind of kitschy, again, places, objects that people have neglected. Some of these motels, there's elements of neglect in them, and I kind of find those flaws endearing. So I'll use the exterior, the interior of the spaces. I'm always looking for certain things, obviously pastel colors, lines. And it's a great way to work under deadline. Some of these sessions are about an hour to 2 hours. So sometimes when there's a little more time, they become confessional. I've had people tell me things they haven't told their own children, how at this motel, they cheated on their husband, or, oh my goodness, just tears have been shed in the motel room. So it was this fascinating experiment in a way, just not only to make images, but connect with people. And also what motels stand for is fascinating to me. We call these spaces home. They become these very intimate spaces for a short amount of time. The amount of people that come and go through these spaces, and what they stand for, how long they've been there. And I tend to attach human qualities to everything. I've done that since I was a child. And so these places, these rooms, they have souls and characters to me. And part of this project, I think, also has been finding, capturing these places before they get bulldozed and, a 15-story condo tower gets put up in their place. And then we come to this lovely quote by Helmut Newton, infamous fashion photographer. Any photographer who says he's not a voyeur is either stupid or a liar. And a lot of my work, especially with the Please Disturb series, definitely has embedded in it that idea of voyeurism. So going back to asking what people will do for me in these situations, for example, this woman, I had these pink sauna pants that I had bought on eBay, and I knew they were see-through, and I knew I wanted to exploit the fact that they were see-through. And so I asked her if she did yoga. She said yes. And I said, can you touch your toes? She said yes. So I was building up, knowing that what I was asking could be a stretch. And I think she was like the executive director of the local chamber of commerce. So I was flattered and floored that, that I think people being in the motel room gave them some license to either be naughty. I mean, this particular project was, this session in this particular motel was a partnership, or I guess like a partnership with the local art museum. So most of my participants were their docents. So that was fascinating to me, that I had these older women in their 50s, 60s, 70s. The oldest one was in her 80s. And, they were having a blast putting on these tights and being seductive and playing for the camera. And so, and it told me a lot too, because I realized before this that, I was shooting mainly people in my social circle, that maybe there wasn't diversity of age or body shape. And that, this particular experience awakened a lot of that in me as well, that, wow, there's so much more out there. Go back, just sharing a few more. Loving these little details that these motels have, like these benches with the tile inlay. These little details make everything for me. This one, it's French for jealousy. When I was a kid, I thought jealousy windows were jealousy windows. And when I was looking for a title for this piece, and everyone was like, "You're wrong, it's jealousy." And then when I actually looked up the definition for jealousy, that's what it said. It's French for jealousy. So I wasn't too far off. And again, there's that mystery of the figure. We don't see her face, but hopefully, you know, there's some romance, mystery, intrigue happening with this. And of course, just the formality of this place. You have these vintage 50s breeze blocks on the right, and then, you know, LED lighting that goes across the whole motel. So just the strangeness that happens. When I was doing research for this project, I came across Gay Talese, who wrote a book on this man in Denver, right outside of Denver, called the Voyeurs Motel. And this man, he built, and he had an observation deck above all of the rooms, and he could peer into every single room through the AC vents. And it fascinated me. He did this for years, and he opened up to the writer Gay Talese about it. And I think it was first published in Esquire or GQ, and then it became a book, and then a Netflix documentary. Just fascinating about those boundaries that we have, and the motel and what happens at the motel. And then sometimes in the motel room, it's just simple things too. It's not always based around props. It's also just who's arriving there, who's there with me, and how they interpret the space. This is a fellow artist, photographer, Jason Lazarus, conceptual art photographer, and he just wanted to take a nap when he arrived, and that was fine. So I love that people will take their own way with it. Asking people to lay down in bathtubs. I will say that COVID definitely put a damper on this project, right? Being in a small room with one or two people. I hope to go forward with it now that things are easing a bit. The last one I did was 2019, and so I'm definitely hungry for another one. This was actually from 2019, yeah, so this was from one of the last sessions I did. So this brings us to a current series called Excess. And this is where everything really changes for me. I basically turn the camera on myself, and I'm ruminating about my own body and thinking about what the ideal body is. And oops, there we go. This is my dad on the right. He was a former heavyweight boxer. He fought George Foreman in 1973 for the heavyweight title. He lost, but he was the first Puerto Rican to fight for the heavyweight championship. So growing up, athleticism, fighting, shadow boxing in the driveway, I saw all of that with my dad. He always was fit, always in shape, always running, jogging. None of that interested me. I wish it would have at the time, but it didn't. And I was made very aware of having a fat body. I refer to myself as fat. It's just a factual thing. It's like being tall or short, blonde, brunette. I'm fat. But it had a very negative connotation growing up. And, you know, the constant back and forth of positioning your body against, you know, society. And where things changed for me, where things started to reveal themselves was 2015. Caleb Lindsay, who does these wonderful video series based on like, around, I was going to say novellas, but soap operas. And I played a character in one of his. And so seeing myself on screen started to just open up things for me, open up channels, and that, oh, I can be in front of a camera. I don't have to be hiding behind the camera. And I started researching fat bodies throughout art and looking at the Venus of Willendorf and thinking, wow, that body existed thousands of years ago. My body existed thousands of years ago. And so thinking that I wasn't so strange or so alien in this larger context. And then, of course, Instagram has been a huge influence on my rethinking of the fat body. For example, Tess Holliday, who is a model, I think she wears like a size 24. I mean, a size 10 back in the day was plus size for fashion. So she's very much outside of that fashion norm. And so seeing these bodies get normalized or just seeing them more in my feed on social media has helped me love my own body a little more. And it's been important seeing that. I think about the work of Shug McDaniel, who photographs nude bodies in natural places around Florida in the springs. And again, just seeing these bodies is beautiful. After spending so many years of loathing your own, I was thinking to myself, well, I find this beautiful. Why not myself? And my first big step was in 2019, where a friend of mine had painted my portrait in grad school, Chalice Mitchell. And I took the portrait and positioned myself behind it. I was going to say hide, but yeah, I probably was hiding. And so this was that, okay, I'll give a little bit. I'm going to reveal a little bit of myself, but not too much. And in that play of perception, right? The painting, these levels of revealing. And so I brought back my aesthetic, the love of color and tights. These are exercise bands. So with my props, I often use things in ways that they're not meant to, or the incorrect way. You put them on me, they roll up. I was also thinking about the work of Derrick Adams. And again, the idea of, his focus is the Black body at leisure, right? Seeing these bodies that have often been seen in so many negative ways in positive ways. And I saw that translate into the thinking of my own work, right? That these bodies can be beautiful, they can be at leisure, they're able bodies, they can do things. And so that's what I was thinking about in my work. The work of Laura Aguilar, her nudes. And Genevieve Gagnon. So it's been really important to me to see these different representations of the fat body in art, and also becoming aware of fat theory. That has been really important in my work. Before this, I really didn't know that fat theory existed. So that has been very eye-opening. And doing these close-ups, this particular body of work for me has also been me thinking about formal ideas, just formally. I know there's the political underpinnings, right, of the fat body, but also just looking at it in a purely formal sense and the geometry of it. And obviously I can't help but think that so much of this is influenced by my time in Miami, living among the Art Deco architecture, the colors, and this idea of the architecture being monumental. I lovingly refer to this one as faux thigh gap. This is not my butt, but just my knees. But if you squint, it's a thigh gap. So these were installed recently at the Tampa Museum of Art for the regional art exhibition called Skyway. and I'll be approaching the install image for that. These are some like newer ones that hadn't been seen that I was revisiting. And I still have more ideas for this series going forward. Again, looking at the different ways, the different shapes I can make with my body. So here's the install view from Skyway. So this was 5 16 by 20 pieces on metal, overlaid with these painted shapes. And I was really pleased with it. I was, I still think about this exhibition and the fact that, this parts of my fat body were in this show, and you really think about it. And recently 3 of them were acquired for its permanent collection. So I was just really excited that I will live on in the permanent collection of the Tampa Museum of Art. And I wanted to end the talk. I still have another body of work, I believe, if there's time. If not, that's okay. But I wanted to end the talk of the Excess series with this one, because in compiling images for this talk, I found this one because I wanted to share with you what I look like like zoomed out. And this portrait became very powerful to me just because of the look on my face. I feel like there's this look of steely determination, or just like, I'm done, right? I'm done with society's perceptions. There was a great quote too that I had from the author, Cecilia Hartley. She was responding to fat as the ultimate form of female covert power. And she wrote, "It allows a woman to nurture herself, to reject sexually stereotyped roles, to deny society's demand that she be the perfect woman, and to stake claim on the world, taking up space without having to demand it." And so I just thought that was really interesting. Carrie, do I have enough time to share the other series, or I can wrap up here? That's fine.
Yeah, well, we have just about 10 or 11 minutes.
Okay.
So yeah,
Sure.
Why don't you show the next, if it's just a couple minutes, I think that'll be fine.
Oh yeah, this one I can go pretty quick. This is more just, I tend to do projects concurrently just to keep me busy. And this one is outside of the studio. It's more, I don't want to call it documentary. There are some staged elements to it. But there's been this phenomenon throughout, I guess, the eastern part of the United States, where the street lights are going bad, they're defective, and so the green layer on the light of these LED lights deteriorates, and so what's left are red and blue, and they make these purple street lights, and they throw this cast of purple or blue light on their environs, and I've been finding it really magical in how they change the landscape or their surrounding locations, and the shadows become neon yellow. And it's just been really fascinating to me how it works or doesn't work. Let's see. So I'll go out often after rains, looking for really good reflections. Sometimes I will bring, a model with me, and I'll bring some of my props and everything. And so it's just been a lot of fun. It's been like a game for me, searching around town, looking for these. I've actually asked people to start hashtagging on Instagram. I call it Other People's Purple, OPP. And since there's so many, I think it's going to be hard for me to get to all of them before they're fixed, repaired, and disappear. So my goal is to eventually curate a show where it's not only my work that I've done, but other people, because it affects everyone. I mean, there's a lot of them all over Tampa, and they're spilling into other communities as well. And this is where I'll end. I thank you again for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you so much. That was a fascinating like throw line of so many influences and so many trajectories that kind of come and go. I love that the ebbing of that, and the color is just phenomenal. I think
Thank you.
I also love that self-portrait that you have, because so much of all of this is, it's such the averted gaze, and that one is not.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I had to
Okay.
come. It's almost like a feeling of coming full circle where I journal a lot, and I was thinking that I wasn't looking at myself, and I feel like that project has really allowed me to look at myself and accept myself.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful. So yeah, are there, people are welcome to unmute themselves, or you can put something in the chat if you have questions. So
I'll
don't be
do
shy.
a quick comment and a question, because Selena, I loved it. It was fabulous. I have to go to another meeting at 2, so I'm going to talk fast. I loved how Bad Batch just like it felt like the streetlights were in collaboration with your color scheme. Like it was just incredible how the environment, especially during these weird pandemic times, that you went from intimate hotel rooms to the streets, which was really, really cool. And
That sounds great too, Ellen. I went to the streets.
the purple streets. It was really great.
From the motel room to the streets. It's a pretty good connection.
I love it. I love it. And then that brought up, because you mentioned sometimes when you go to one of these sites with the purple lights, you bring your props and a model. And I wondered too, when we were looking at the series in the hotel room, and you mentioned like people come in and they bring their baggage with them, as they come in.
Yeah.
And when you lay out like the options for them, how much are they making choices, or are you curating selections with or for them? Or could you talk about that process a little bit?
That's a great question. So typically I will lay everything out. I'll have drawers open. I'll have things in the closet. Everything's curated in a sense that I know based on like the motel, the type of colors and objects that I want. And someone told me once that like, it's this control that I have where I'm giving people a false sense of control or like choice. I'm like, oh, it's interesting. But I do. I mean, they can thumb through everything, see what they would like. A lot of people though pass it back on to me and say, you know what, I'm curious how you will, interpret me. And I love all the different ways. I've had people tell me, look, I don't want to be in it. My hands can be in it, but they don't want to be shown. I've had people tell me they refuse to wear wigs because they fear of lice. I mean, so there's these little mini challenges that will happen along the way, but I find that in those, setbacks, there's actual room for opportunity for spontaneity, things like that. I love that. So yes, they do have a choice, but everything is curated on the front end. And
that's what I wondered. Yeah.
I will add to that, Ellen, that some people are aware of my aesthetic before they come to the room. And sometimes they will bring like their own things. I've had people donate things like, I think you would like this, and they'll leave it with me. So that's been wonderful too.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Selena.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you.
I have to duck out, but thank you.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions that people have?
I have a question.
Sure.
Is my audio working?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is there any like female pop or like rap artists? Like I was thinking like I was looking at your stuff, and a lot of St. Vincent's costumes really remind me of the tights. And then I assume you probably know Lizzo. Like
Yes.
if she's been any inspiration to you.
Phoebe
Phoebe Bridgers.
Who was the last one?
Phoebe Bridgers.
I don't know if I know her, Phoebe Bridgers. I'm writing that down though.
Bjork.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just like, is there any artist that specifically from like the music world that's influenced?
Oh, sure. I forgot to mention, I mean, just growing up, Madonna played such a huge role as a young girl growing up in the 80s that, a woman owning her sexuality unapologetically, right? Her body, that was really important. I still think about Madonna a lot. I mean, contemporary, like current art, not that Madonna isn't contemporary, but, I can think of her, I can see her now. She's a Puerto Rican rapper out of New York, and she sings songs like Brujas. I can see her now, but she's also very like owns herself, owns her persona. Definitely Lizzo, like you said. St. Vincent, I felt like some people told me about her after seeing my work, and someone joked like one of her album covers is someone bending over in tights, and they joked, "Oh, she's stealing your style." And I think a lot of times some of this stuff, just we're all going to think of things, right? Things are going to overlap. But yeah, I definitely think of female artists. I mean, artists like Nicki Minaj or Cardi B. I didn't like her at first, but now I adore her. I think she's wonderful. And, just these not portrayals, but these women who are outspoken. I think that's so refreshing, and it's terrifying for people when women have a voice. And in my case, when we take up more space than we should. I mean, it's like a double threat. Like, you have a voice and you're taking up more space. That's not good.
Agreed. I like women that take up space.
I think everyone should just own their space. Yeah, I mean, no matter gender. I mean, I follow a lot of great people on Instagram, even men that are fat or transgender people. And, again, just the idea of having a voice and taking up space when you are considered different from society is so important.
Great. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, I'm just going to ask I have a couple other things I was interested in. One of them was thinking about the scale of your work, because you had the one example of your work installed and a 16 by 20. And I'm just wondering, do you experiment with scale, like when you do installations? Because when we see your work on a screen, we're not quite sure what the proportions are and what that means to you in terms of making those choices as to how you present the work.
Thanks. And that makes me wish I would have added one in that I had. But so the women lying in the sand, it's the two like tights wearing figures, and they're lying in the sand with their faces covered. That originally was a 40 by 60 print. So I can print these pretty large. And then I was asked to submit that image for an exhibition in Little Haiti, an outdoor exhibition. And I want to say they blew up the image to roughly 8 feet by 15 feet. I wasn't sure that my work could be blown up that large. And because that was a digital photograph, and it was not even a full sensor. It was a crop sensor. So, I mean, they did a phenomenal job on it. And so, yeah, I would love to experiment even further with large scale works like that. And that was on metal.
Okay. So why you choose metal just so it's easy, so it has a flatness to it, or it's easy to hang in?
For them, I think they were thinking for outdoors that it would,
of course,
with the elements, especially in Miami, that it could handle that. And then I was selected a couple of years back when the census was happening. I submitted work for a census project that was trying to get people to complete their census, encourage them to complete it. Yeah. And that ended up being on a billboard in Miami. And so, yeah, it's nice seeing my work get reinterpreted in these different ways. That it has legs.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. This has been really enjoyable, and I know that you're going to be talking with a couple of photography classes afterwards. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it so much.
All right. Thanks so much, Carrie. Thank you, everyone.